"You'll never be a real dad," my wife's son said when I married her. He refused to speak to me for years, but on his wedding day, he walked up, hugged me, and said, "I can only hope to be half the father you were to me." Daniel adjusted his tie one last time, staring at the man in the mirror. 37 years old, not particularly tall, not particularly rugged, just steady. He worked night shifts as a nurse in downtown Chicago, kept his apartment clean, sent holiday cards even when others forgot. Today wasn't just another day. It was the beginning of something he had long thought would never come his way. Family. Rachel stood at the end of the aisle like a sunrise, her soft smile brimming with both joy and nerves. Her dark auburn hair was pinned back simply, and her lace-trimmed gown moved like quiet waves. But Daniel's eyes, drawn instinctively to the young boy standing beside her, lingered longer than he meant them to. Logan, 13 years old, barely taller than her shoulders, stiff in his suit. His arms crossed tightly, lips pressed into a line, eyes narrowed, not with tears of joy but with something closer to resentment. He had barely looked Daniel's way since the ceremony began, and when Rachel gently nudged him forward for the family photo, he stepped with the kind of reluctance that made the photographer hesitate before snapping the shot. Daniel had known this would be part of the package. When he met Rachel 2 years ago, it was in the quiet chaos of the hospital cafeteria. She had been there visiting her aunt. He had just finished a double shift. They shared a vending machine snafu and half an hour of conversation, and that was it. An ordinary beginning that bloomed quietly. She told him about Logan early on. She didn't hide the heartbreak of losing her husband to a car accident 3 years prior. She spoke of Logan like a mother trying not to break, proud of his sharp mind and fierce independence, yet afraid of how much he'd withdrawn since the loss. Daniel had only met Logan a handful of times before the wedding. Always brief, always stiff. A hey here, a nod there. The boy made it clear he didn't want to talk. Rachel urged patience, and Daniel agreed. He wasn't looking to take anyone's place. He didn't even expect affection, just a chance to be part of something. The wedding reception buzzed with music and clinking glasses. Rachel's family offered warm hugs and congratulations, and her friends, teachers mostly, were quick to welcome Daniel with kind smiles and gentle teasing. But Logan? He sat at a corner table, headphones in, eyes on his phone. When it was time for the first dance, he disappeared altogether. Later that evening, as guests filtered out and fairy lights flickered against the darkening sky, Daniel found Rachel resting her head against his shoulder outside the venue. "He's not angry at you," she said softly. "He's just still angry." Daniel nodded. He didn't need her to explain further. Grief had its own language, and Daniel had spent enough nights in hospital rooms to recognize its many dialects. Logan's grief wasn't loud or explosive. It was cold, calculated, silent. When they returned home, Rachel's house, now their shared home, Logan went straight to his room, closed the door, and didn't say a word. Over the next few weeks, Daniel tried not to hover. He adjusted his schedule to be more present in the evenings, helped with dishes, fixed the squeaky cabinet in the kitchen. When Logan walked into the room, Daniel would offer a soft hello to which Logan responded with silence or a short glance. It wasn't that the boy was cruel, it was more haunting than that. Logan seemed indifferent, as if Daniel were just a shadow in the house, part of the furniture but not part of the story. One Friday evening, Daniel brought home Logan's favorite takeout. Rachel had mentioned it once, and left the box on the counter with a note. "Just in case you're hungry. No pressure." He saw the empty box in the trash the next morning. No thank you, no conversation. But it was gone, that was something. At school events, Daniel stood in the back, applauding with the other parents, though Logan never looked for him. On weekends, he offered rides to soccer practice, which Logan refused. Rachel would drive instead. Daniel waited, always waited. Rachel remained steady between them, never forcing conversation, never apologizing for either side. But Daniel saw the weight in her eyes, how it tugged at her, how she longed for peace between the two people she loved most. One Sunday afternoon, Rachel was grading papers on the patio while Daniel tried his hand at making pasta from scratch in the kitchen. Logan passed through the room without stopping, heading for the front door. "Going out?" Daniel asked lightly. Logan didn't respond, just opened the door, stepped outside, and closed it behind him. Daniel stood for a moment, flour on his hands, The dough half rolled on the counter. He wasn't sure what he'd expected. A grunt, maybe, or even a yeah. But the silence pressed hard, like a door closing with a quiet finality. Still, he kept showing up. Not with grand gestures, but with presence. He fixed Logan's broken desk lamp. He left a basketball magazine in the living room. He never forced small talk, just existed nearby, available, not intrusive. Rachel noticed. One evening after Logan had gone to bed, she touched Daniel's hand across the table. "You're doing more than enough," she whispered. Daniel shook his head gently. "I don't want him to think I'm trying to take over. I just want him to know I'm here." Rachel smiled, weary but warm. He sees it, even if he won't admit it yet. Daniel hoped that was true, because some days he wasn't sure. As winter crept into Chicago and the winds grew sharper, the warmth inside their home remained selective. Rachel and Daniel shared soft laughter and quiet companionship. Logan remained a storm cloud on the periphery, unpredictable, distant. But Daniel didn't retreat. Not yet. He knew healing wasn't a straight line. He knew Logan wasn't a project to be fixed, but a person wrestling with the echoes of loss. Daniel couldn't erase the past, couldn't replace a father. But maybe, just maybe, he could build something else. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but he would keep trying. And so the new chapter began, not with joy unbroken, not with promises of smooth roads ahead, but with quiet determination, the kind that could someday make all the difference. The days passed slowly, like frost creeping across a window pane. Logan remained unshaken in his silence, and Daniel, though unwavering in his patience, felt the chill more acutely, with each attempt that met nothing in return. The boy's indifference was not born of rudeness, but of something far colder, an emotional distance carved deep and frozen solid. One Saturday morning, the house buzzed with the smell of pancakes and freshly brewed coffee. Rachel was humming softly as she set the table, her hair tied up, a pencil stuck behind her ear. Daniel had offered to cook breakfast for all three of them, hoping, perhaps foolishly, that food could act as a bridge. Logan walked into the kitchen just as Daniel flipped the last pancake onto a plate. "Morning," Daniel said, his voice casual, almost breezy. Logan gave a nod, but didn't meet his eyes. He reached for a glass, filled it with orange juice, and sat down at the table without a word. Rachel placed a stack of pancakes in front of him with a smile, and Logan mumbled a thank you directed more to the plate than to either adult in the room. Daniel sat down across from him, trying not to overthink the silence. They ate in near quiet, save for the occasional clink of a fork or Rachel's attempt to spark a bit of conversation. "Did you finish that English project, Logan?" she asked. "Yeah." "What book did you choose again?" "Of Mice and Men." Rachel nodded. "A tough one. What did you think?" Logan shrugged. "It was fine." That was it. The conversation slipped away like steam from a coffee mug. Daniel wanted to ask him what he thought of George's choice at the end, or if the loneliness of the characters felt familiar, but he held his tongue. Even a well-meant question could feel like an invasion to Logan. After breakfast, Logan retreated to his room without a glance back. Rachel sighed, resting her chin on her hand. "He used to talk more," she said, not looking at Daniel. Before everything." Daniel reached for her hand across the table. "He's still in there. I just have to find the door." Later that week, Rachel had a school conference, leaving Daniel and Logan alone for the evening. He cooked spaghetti and left Logan's plate on the counter, then returned to the living room with a book. The boy came down quietly, grabbed the food and returned upstairs without speaking. It was a small evening, unremarkable by any standard, but to Daniel it was another notch on the slow ladder he was climbing. 2 days later, Daniel spotted something on the dining table that made him pause, a small hand-drawn sketch. It was of a motorcycle, detailed and precise, the shadows on the chrome expertly penciled. He picked it up, studying the sharp lines and shading, then heard footsteps. "Where did you find that?" Logan's voice came from behind him. Daniel turned slowly, not startled, just careful. "It was on the table. I didn't know you liked drawing." Logan stepped forward, grabbing the paper. "I don't." Daniel nodded once. "Okay, still, it's good work." He said it plainly without too much warmth. Praise could feel condescending if given too eagerly. Logan narrowed his eyes, then turned and left the room. It was progress, if only because Logan had chosen to speak at all. The real shift began one cold Thursday night. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and Rachel was stuck late at school. Daniel was preparing soup when the lights flickered, then died. A full blackout. The power outage covered most of the block, and the silence that followed was thick and unnatural. Daniel lit a few candles and found a flashlight. Upstairs, Logan emerged from his room, annoyed and holding his phone. "My battery's almost dead." "I've got a charger in the car," Daniel offered. "Want to come with me?" Logan hesitated, but then followed him out into the biting cold. In the car, as the heater kicked in, Daniel handed Logan the charger. Logan plugged in his phone and stared at the dashboard lights. "Do you think it's going to come back on soon?" he asked, the question surprisingly calm. "Probably in a couple of hours. They're used to this in winter." Logan nodded. "I hate the dark." Daniel didn't answer right away. "Yeah, it can feel bigger than it really is." Logan looked at him for a second, then turned away. Back inside, they set up candles in the living room. Rachel had called from her office to say she'd be another hour. Logan hovered nearby, glancing at Daniel now and then. "Do you have siblings?" he asked suddenly. Daniel blinked. The question came out of nowhere, but he welcomed it. "No, just me. Must have been quiet." It was. "I got used to it." Logan nodded again, this time more thoughtfully. They sat on the floor with blankets around their shoulders, the flickering candlelight painting long shadows on the walls. For the first time, Logan didn't seem eager to escape Daniel's presence. "What happened to your dad?" Logan asked. The question was soft, unsure. "He left when I was little. I don't remember much about him. My mom raised me alone." "Did it bother you?" Daniel took a breath. "Sometimes, but mostly I just focused on what I had, not what I didn't." Logan didn't respond, but the silence between them no longer felt like a wall. It felt like a bridge waiting to be crossed. When Rachel came home, she found them both sitting on the floor, a flashlight between them. Logan with his hoodie pulled up, Daniel watching a small candle burn down. Her eyes widened slightly, but she said nothing. She simply joined them, and the three sat together as the warmth slowly returned to the house. Not from electricity, but from something far more fragile and important. From that night onward, something changed. Not in grand gestures, not in words, but in energy. Logan didn't flinch when Daniel entered a room. He didn't speak often, but when he did, it wasn't laced with the same frost. The ice wall was still there, but a crack had formed. Daniel knew better than to celebrate too early. Trust, like thawing ice, was a slow process, but he could feel it. The faintest drop of warmth on a long frozen surface. It wasn't affection, not yet, but it was no longer rejection. And for Daniel, that was enough to keep going. The first time Daniel entered the storage room at the back of the house, it was because Rachel had asked him to find an old set of winter blankets. The room had been untouched for some time, judging by the layers of dust on the cardboard boxes and the musty smell that clung to the air. He flicked on the dim overhead bulb and stepped carefully between old furniture, stacked photo albums, and holiday decorations that hadn't seen the light of day in years. He wasn't trying to pry, but curiosity worked its way in as it always did. There was something sacred about storage rooms, physical spaces where a family's past lived on quietly, waiting to be remembered. Daniel had spent enough time helping patients through grief to know that people rarely rid themselves of memory. They just found places to put it. In one corner, beneath a folded tarp and a broken coat rack, was a plastic storage bin labeled in black marker. Jared, Logan, family. Daniel knelt slowly, brushing off the dust. He didn't open it, not right away. The name Jared hit him like a cold wind. That was Rachel's late husband, Logan's father. He stood up, left the bin untouched, and found the blankets she had asked for. But the image of that box stayed with him for days afterward, lingering at the back of his thoughts like a quiet echo. One evening, while Rachel graded essays in the living room, Daniel mentioned it gently. "I found a bin with Jared's name on it." I didn't open it, of course. Rachel looked up, her eyes softening. "That was from our last move, just before the accident. I packed a lot of things quickly, not knowing when I'd be ready to look again." Daniel nodded. "Would you want me to move it somewhere else?" She shook her head. "Leave it there for now, maybe someday, or maybe Logan might want to look. It's his history too." Logan, of course, had never spoken Jared's name around Daniel. It was as if his father's memory occupied a room in the house Daniel wasn't allowed to enter, a sealed chamber guarded not by locks, but by silence. That weekend, a package arrived from Rachel's mother, filled with old photos she had promised to send. Rachel sat at the dining table, sorting through them, calling Daniel over when she found a particularly funny or meaningful one. Logan walked past them on his way to the kitchen and stopped when he noticed the scattered photos. "What are those?" he asked, his voice flat but curious. "Just some old family pictures Grandma sent," Rachel replied, lifting one up. "You were about 4 here, remember?" Logan stepped closer, looking at the photo. In it, a younger Rachel held him in her arms, smiling brightly beside a man Daniel instantly recognized as Jared. Strong jawline, messy blonde hair, warm eyes. Jared was laughing at something just out of frame. Logan reached for the photo but didn't touch it. "Can I?" Rachel handed it to him without a word. Logan stared at it for a moment, his shoulders tightening. "I used to remember his voice," he said quietly. "I don't anymore." Rachel reached out instinctively, but Logan stepped back. "I'm going upstairs." He left the table, the photo still in his hand. Rachel sighed and leaned back in her chair. "He used to ask about Jared all the time," she said. "Then one day, he just stopped. He boxed it up inside himself and never opened it again." Daniel didn't reply. He was thinking about that storage bin again. That night, while Rachel slept, Daniel lay awake thinking about memory, about grief, and how Logan carried it. It wasn't just silence or coldness. It was a wound left unattended for too long. 2 days later, the power flickered again during a storm, and this time Logan didn't retreat to his room. He joined Daniel in the kitchen, asking about the flashlight. They lit a few candles, and Daniel handed Logan a matchbox. "Have you ever light one of these?" Logan smirked faintly. "I'm not 5. Daniel smiled but said nothing. Logan lit a match with a practiced hand and touched it to the wick. They sat together in the low light, neither eager to fill the silence. Then, out of nowhere, Logan spoke. "He used to take me to this hill near the lake. We'd bring sandwiches. He called it our fort. We never told Mom." Daniel kept his voice soft. "Sounds like a good memory." It was. Logan looked down. "I thought it would hurt to talk about him, but it kind of doesn't. Not all the time." Daniel didn't offer advice. He didn't say that talking helped or that Jared would have wanted him to remember the good. He just nodded, accepting the offering. "Do you think it's weird that I don't talk about him more?" Logan asked after a pause. "No," Daniel said. "I think everyone remembers in their own way. Some people talk, some people draw, some people stay quiet for a long time." Logan tilted his head. "What if I forget more? What if I don't even remember the way he laughed?" Daniel considered this. "Then you remember the feeling. That's what stays, the way it felt to be safe, to be loved." Logan looked at him for a long moment, then glanced back down at the candle. "He liked lemon cake. I hated it, but I'd eat it anyway just so he'd smile." That made Daniel chuckle softly. "That's real love, right there." Logan smiled, small but sincere. It didn't last long, but it didn't vanish completely either. The next morning, Daniel found the photo of Jared still on the table, but now it sat beside a small sketch, Logan's hand at work again. This time it wasn't a motorcycle. It was that hill near the lake, a simple drawing, 2 stick figures sitting on a picnic blanket under a tree, sandwiches between them. Rachel found it too, and when she saw it, she didn't cry. She simply placed her hand over her heart and whispered, "He's coming back." Daniel didn't say it aloud, but he agreed. The traces of the past were no longer just weights. They were becoming foundations. Not to forget, not to replace, but to carry forward in a house where memory didn't have to hide in the attic. That night, Daniel opened the storage room again. This time, he brought a folding chair. He sat in front of the bin labeled Jared Logan Family, and without touching it, simply sat there in silence. Not to pry, not to claim, but to keep company with the past. The air in the house shifted in ways not easily seen or measured. It was not that Logan suddenly became warm or expressive, nor did he begin to speak freely over dinner, or join Daniel on the couch for movie nights. The transformation was far subtler, like the way frost begins to melt on a window pane. Imperceptible at first, but relentless in its progress. Daniel noticed it in the details. The way Logan no longer avoided eye contact, the way he sometimes answered with full sentences instead of one-word replies, the way he would linger in the room for a few seconds longer than necessary before leaving. It began on a rainy Sunday morning when Rachel had to leave early for a school meeting. Daniel stayed behind, flipping through a book in the living room. Logan came downstairs, backpack slung over his shoulder, eyes scanning the kitchen. "She's not back yet," Daniel said. "She mentioned she'd be home around noon." Logan muttered something that might have been an acknowledgement. He grabbed a granola bar and stood at the counter, chewing silently. "You headed somewhere?" Daniel asked, trying not to sound overly interested. "Library," Logan replied without looking up. Daniel paused, then offered, "Need a ride?" Logan hesitated, then gave a small shrug. "Sure, I guess." That simple response landed like a drumbeat in Daniel's chest. Not a yes filled with enthusiasm, but not a no either. He grabbed his keys and followed Logan to the car, doing his best to treat the moment as ordinary. The ride was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Daniel kept the music low, a soft jazz station playing in the background. At a red light, he glanced over. "So are you studying for something or just reading?" "Geometry, I suck at it," Logan said, not with bitterness, but with a kind of resigned annoyance. Daniel nodded. "I used to hate geometry. The proofs never made sense to me until I started thinking of them like puzzles. Not math problems, just patterns that needed to fit." Logan didn't respond right away, but when they pulled into the library parking lot, he turned before getting out. "What kind of puzzles?" Daniel smiled. "Like mazes. You don't always go straight. Sometimes you have to go the long way to find the answer." Logan didn't say thank you, but he nodded again, slower this time, and stepped out of the car. Later that week, Daniel came home from the hospital just before dinner. The lights were on, the kitchen smelled of something warm and comforting, and Rachel was humming as she stirred a pot on the stove. Logan was at the table, sketchbook open, pencil moving. He didn't look up when Daniel entered, but he didn't close the book either. Daniel washed his hands and walked over, trying not to hover. "What are you working on?" Logan turned the book slightly. It was another landscape, this time the front porch of the house, drawn from memory but filled with detail. There was a small figure sitting on the steps, legs crossed, head down. "That you?" Daniel asked gently. Logan shrugged. "Maybe." Daniel sat down across from him, careful not to say too much. "So you've got a good eye. You capture stillness really well." Logan looked at him for a moment, and though he didn't smile, something softened in his face. "Thanks," he said. Just one word, but it felt real. That night, after Logan had gone upstairs, Rachel leaned against Daniel on the couch, her voice hushed. "He let you see it?" Daniel nodded. She closed her eyes briefly. "He never lets anyone see his sketchbook, not even me." Daniel didn't reply. He only held the moment, careful not to drop it. A few days later, Logan came into the living room while Daniel was watching a documentary on marine biology. He hovered near the door. "You like this stuff?" he asked. "Yeah, always been fascinated by ocean life. You ever see footage of those giant squids? Feels like science fiction." Logan edged closer, curiosity tugging at him. "They live deep down, right?" "Thousands of meters," Daniel replied. "Places with no sunlight. It's like a whole alien world down there." Logan nodded, then sat on the armrest of the couch. He didn't stay long, only a few minutes, but it was long enough to mark a shift. Another evening, Rachel had to stay overnight at a teachers' conference, leaving Daniel and Logan alone again. Daniel made chili, left the toppings on the side so Logan could choose his own. They ate at the table with the TV playing in the background. When they finished, Logan helped clear the dishes without being asked. As they loaded the dishwasher, Daniel ventured a question. "You ever think about going to art school?" Logan hesitated. "Sometimes, but I don't know if I'm good enough." Being good isn't the point. Being passionate is. The rest comes with practice. Logan didn't reply, but his silence didn't carry resistance. It was thoughtful, almost open. That night, Daniel passed by Logan's room and noticed the door slightly ajar. He paused, unsure whether to speak. From inside, Logan's voice came quiet but clear. "You can come in." Daniel pushed the door open gently. Logan was sitting on his bed, sketchbook on his lap, a pencil tucked behind his ear. "I was thinking about that squid you mentioned," he said, "and I drew this." He handed over the sketch pad. It was a stunning image of an underwater scene, bioluminescent creatures swirling in the depths, a massive squid lurking near the bottom, eyes wide and haunting. "This is incredible," Daniel said, genuinely moved. Logan nodded just once. "You can keep it if you want." Daniel didn't answer right away. He looked at the boy, really looked, and saw not just a grieving son, but an artist, a thinker, a person slowly unfreezing. "I'd be honored," he finally said. Logan gave a small smile, quick, almost invisible, but real. Later, as Daniel placed the drawing in a protective sleeve and tucked it into a folder, he understood something clearly. Trust was not something you earned in sweeping gestures. It grew slowly, like moss on stone, built from countless small acts, consistent presence and silent listening. The cracks in the wall were no longer faint lines. They were widening, letting in air and light. The first signs of real trust, delicate and dangerous in their vulnerability. Daniel knew the journey ahead would still be long. There would be steps forward and steps back. But now, for the first time, they were walking on the same road, together. Spring arrived in the city with hesitant warmth, the snow melting into thin lines along the sidewalk, trees shaking off their bare branches in favor of budding green. The house, too, reflected the change. Windows opened for the first time in months, letting in air that smelled like rain and earth. But with the renewal came something less welcome, a shadow neither Daniel nor Rachel had anticipated. It began on a quiet Thursday evening. Daniel was home early, cooking dinner, while Rachel corrected essays upstairs, and Logan sketched at the kitchen table. Music played faintly in the background, and for once the atmosphere felt easy. Not joyful, not loud, but stable. A new rhythm was beginning to take shape. That was until Daniel's phone buzzed. He reached for it without thought. The message came from a colleague at the hospital. Nothing unusual, just a reminder about the upcoming volunteer weekend. But attached was a photo, one taken during last year's event. Daniel standing beside another nurse, both of them smiling, covered in paint from decorating the children's ward. It was innocent, casual, but Logan looked up at the exact moment Daniel opened the image. His eyes flicked to the screen, then to Daniel, and then back to his sketch without a word. The shift was subtle but unmistakable, a tightening of his jaw, a closing of expression. Daniel didn't think much of it. Teenagers were unpredictable. But over the next few days, Logan's demeanor began to change again. The short answers returned, the longer silences at dinner, the way he left a room as soon as Daniel entered. Rachel noticed it first. One night after Logan had gone to bed, she sat beside Daniel on the couch, her brow furrowed. "Did something happen between you two?" Daniel shook his head. "Not that I know of. Everything felt okay, then it didn't." Rachel sighed. "That's the thing with grief. You think you're making progress and then something pulls you right back." Daniel wanted to believe that was all it was, a temporary slide. But the change in Logan wasn't just sadness. It felt like suspicion, like something had been triggered. It wasn't until the following weekend that the shadow took form. Daniel found Logan in the backyard, sitting on the steps with a sketch pad in his lap, but not drawing, just staring. "You mind if I join you?" Daniel asked. Logan shrugged. Daniel sat beside him, leaving space between them. After a few minutes, Logan spoke. "That woman in the photo, who is she?" Daniel blinked, confused. "What photo?" "On your phone, the other night. You were smiling." Realization clicked into place. Daniel felt the weight of the moment. That was Julia, a nurse at the hospital. We did a charity event together last year. Logan nodded slowly, expression unreadable. "Were you two close?" Daniel kept his voice calm. "We're friends, nothing more." Logan didn't answer right away. Then, "You looked happy." Daniel turned slightly. "I was. It was a good day. We raised money for a pediatric program. That photo just happened to catch a light moment." Logan's shoulders stiffened. "You never laugh like that around here." There it was. Not jealousy, not curiosity, but fear. Fear that Daniel had another life, another bond, something secret that might prove everything fragile between them had been a lie. Daniel chose his words carefully. "It's different. At the hospital, I'm doing a job. I'm on. I'm not thinking about how every word I say might affect someone still hurting. Here, I'm more careful." "Why?" Logan asked, voice low. Because I care what you think, and I don't want to mess this up. Logan didn't reply. He closed his sketchpad and stood up. I should get back inside. Daniel let him go, unsure if his words had reached the place they were meant to. The shadow remained between them, vague and undefined, but real. That night, Rachel asked if something had changed again. Daniel told her the truth. He saw a photo, drew conclusions. I tried to explain, but I'm not sure it helped. Rachel leaned against him, sighing. He's still afraid you're temporary. That if he lets himself trust you, you'll leave too. Or that I'll leave you. Or that we'll all go back to being broken. I'm not going anywhere, Daniel said. I know, but he doesn't believe in forever anymore. The days that followed were quiet. Not cold, but cautious. Logan didn't retreat entirely, but his openness was gone. The cracks of trust had sealed again, not with ice, but with something harder to melt. Doubt. Daniel gave him space. He didn't push. Instead, he focused on being present, making dinner, fixing the loose stair rail, picking up Logan's favorite snacks during errands. He didn't try to win him back, he just remained. Then, one evening, a small shift. Daniel came home to find Logan in the living room, watching an old black and white movie. The volume was low. Daniel sat on the far end of the couch without a word. Minutes passed. You ever seen this one? Logan asked suddenly. Daniel looked at the screen. Yeah, years ago. The ending still gets me. Logan glanced over. I thought you only watched documentaries. Daniel smiled faintly. I like good stories, no matter the format. They sat in silence after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence where something broken starts to slowly knit itself back together. The shadow was still there, but lighter now. A reminder of how delicate trust could be, how even small misunderstandings, when filtered through grief, could become storms. But the fact that Logan had spoken at all meant the storm had passed without breaking everything. That for Daniel was enough. May arrived with a stretch of warm days, and for the first time in months, Logan left his window open at night. The breeze moved through the house like a breath held too long, now finally released. With school nearing its end and the long stretch of summer on the horizon, Rachel began to plan a small family getaway, something simple, quiet, close to home. She brought it up one evening over dinner. There's a cabin near Lake Geneva, she said, glancing between Daniel and Logan. I went there as a kid. It's just trees and water and quiet. I thought it might be nice for us. Daniel nodded. That sounds good. Logan didn't respond at first. He pushed his rice around with his fork, then said, You used to go there with Dad. Rachel's smile faltered. We did. Logan looked up. So, why take someone else now? The silence that followed was not angry but heavy. Daniel didn't speak. He waited. Rachel reached across the table, her hand gentle but firm. Because this is your life too, Logan. And it doesn't have to stop growing just because something ended. Logan didn't argue. But the shadow in his eyes returned, quiet and familiar. They didn't press him. The next morning, Rachel found a sketch on the kitchen table. It was the lake. He'd drawn it from memory. Two figures stood at the water's edge, not holding hands, not smiling, just standing, watching the water. Rachel placed the drawing in the drawer carefully. That same week, the school held its annual art exhibit. Logan had submitted 3 pieces, all landscapes, none signed. Daniel and Rachel attended together, walking the rows of drawings and paintings as teachers mingled and students hovered near their work. They found Logan's corner quietly, without his guidance. Daniel recognized the hill from the lake sketch, the front porch of the house and the ocean depths with the squid, but it was the 4th piece, one not part of the 3 Logan had said he submitted, that stopped them. It was a portrait. A man standing in profile, one hand on the back of a chair, face turned slightly toward the light. The details were precise, creases in the forehead, the soft curl of the mouth, the shadows beneath the eyes. It was Daniel. Rachel turned to him, but Daniel's eyes remained on the sketch. Did you know he drew this? She shook her head slowly. That night, Logan didn't mention the exhibit, but he didn't avoid them either. They sat together in the living room, Daniel reading, Rachel correcting tests, Logan sketching again. The silence was warm, but still beneath it, something lingered, an echo neither of them dared to name. The echo took form a few days later, on Father's Day. Daniel hadn't expected anything. He knew the date, of course, had marked it in his mind as something tender and precarious. He planned to keep a low profile, give Logan space, perhaps take a long walk, and let the day pass quietly. But over breakfast, Rachel kissed him on the cheek and said, "Thank you." "For what?" he asked. "For being here." Logan came down later. He didn't say good morning, didn't sit. He walked to the refrigerator, poured a glass of water, and stood by the sink. Daniel pretended not to notice. He folded the newspaper and stood to rinse his plate. "Did you ever want kids?" Logan asked suddenly. Daniel turned, caught off guard. I thought about it, but my life never really moved in that direction." Logan nodded once. "So now you have me." The tone was unreadable. Not mocking, not kind, just matter of fact. Daniel met his eyes. "No, I have you and your mom, but not because I was missing something, because I found something I didn't know I needed." Logan stared at him for a long moment, then placed his glass in the sink and walked away. Rachel touched Daniel's arm. "That's the closest he's ever come to acknowledging you like that." "I know," Daniel whispered, "and I won't rush him." Later that day, Logan left the house without saying where he was going. Rachel worried, but Daniel said nothing. He trusted Logan's sense of direction, his need to disappear when something inside him was too loud to ignore. Just after sunset, Daniel found something slipped under his door, a folded page from Logan's sketchbook. No drawing this time, just words written in small, tight handwriting. "I don't know what to call you, but I don't hate that you're here." Daniel read it twice, then 3 times. He didn't show it to Rachel. He simply placed it inside his wallet, like something sacred. The echo of absence was still part of their lives. Jared's memory didn't fade, and neither did the ache of his loss. But it began to live alongside something else, something quieter but no less powerful. One evening, Daniel found Logan in the garage, rummaging through a box. Tools scattered across the workbench, sawdust in the air. "Need a hand?" Daniel asked. Logan didn't look up. "I want to build a frame for the lake sketch." "For the one you left on the table?" "Yeah. Thought maybe we could hang it." Daniel walked over, picked up a tape measure, and said, "Let's do it." They worked in near silence, measuring, sawing, sanding. Logan's movements were precise, focused. Daniel followed his lead. When they finished, the frame was simple, clean, perfectly fitted. "We can hang it in the hallway," Logan said. "Wherever you want." Logan didn't smile, but he nodded. That night, after Rachel had gone to bed, Daniel found him standing in the hallway, staring at the newly framed sketch now on the wall. "You remember it differently than I do," Daniel said. Logan shrugged. "Probably." Daniel looked at the drawing again. "But it feels right." They stood there for a while, neither speaking, letting the quiet do the work. Words couldn't. Echoes don't always fade. Sometimes they settle in the walls, in the breath between conversations, in the spaces we don't name. But they don't have to haunt. They can be reminders of what was lost, yes, but also of what was found. And in that house on that evening, the echo of absence became something new. Presence. Summer settled into the city with a dense golden stillness. The days grew longer, the light lingering well past dinner, and the nights carried a humid hush that made the house feel heavier, slower, but not unpleasant. Daniel found himself adapting to this new rhythm without resistance. The hospital shifts were shorter, the pace less frantic, and for the first time since he'd moved in, he felt himself thinking of the house not as Rachel's, not as a place he was visiting, but as home. Logan, too, shifted, not outwardly. He still kept to himself, still spoke with restraint, but the silence between them had changed shape. It no longer loomed, it hovered, and between them began to form a strange, comforting language, a series of unspoken agreements. It started with small things. Logan no longer vanished when Daniel entered a room. He didn't offer conversation, but he didn't flee either. If Daniel brought home groceries, Logan would silently unpack them. If Daniel cooked, Logan would clean. Nothing was said. No thank yous, no instructions. Just a quiet understanding that built itself from routine. One afternoon, Daniel returned from a shift at the hospital and found Logan sitting at the kitchen table, an open laptop in front of him. The boy didn't look up, but his voice was clear. "Internet's down." Daniel checked the router and restarted it. A minute later, the connection returned. Logan muttered, "Thanks," without breaking focus. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. The exchange had spoken enough. Another evening, Rachel had to attend a friend's birthday party across town. She kissed Daniel on the cheek and called to Logan that she'd be back late. As soon as the front door closed behind her, Daniel looked up from the book he was reading and met Logan's eyes. "You want to order something, or should I cook?" Logan shrugged. "Pizza's fine." Daniel nodded. They sat down to eat 30 minutes later, the crust already cooling, the television on but barely audible. Logan chose the movie, an animated science fiction film, and Daniel made no comment, though he noticed it was one Jared had apparently loved. Halfway through, Logan spoke. "You like this?" Daniel took a moment to respond. "I do." "They used to watch this on weekends," Logan said, not specifying who they were. Daniel didn't ask. He just said, "It's good." Logan didn't look at him, but his shoulders relaxed slightly. Over the weeks that followed, these unspoken exchanges wove themselves into the fabric of the house. There were no apologies for the past, no declarations of change, just gestures, a door left open, a plate washed, a question asked without suspicion. One Saturday morning, Daniel found Logan in the backyard, barefoot in the grass, sketching again. He didn't announce himself, just watched for a moment from the porch. "Mind if I see?" Logan handed over the notebook. It was a sketch of the kitchen, light pouring in through the window, a half-finished breakfast on the table. Daniel noticed the details: the open newspaper, the coffee cup, a plate with crumbs. His plate. "You drew this from memory?" "Yeah. It's peaceful." Logan nodded. "That's what I was going for." Daniel handed it back carefully. "You got it." That evening, Rachel returned from a school planning meeting with a stack of folders and a furrowed brow. She moved through the house like a thundercloud until she saw Daniel and Logan standing at the stove together, arguing in low voices about the correct spice for chili. She froze. Logan noticed her first. "He's wrong," he said without turning. Rachel blinked. "About what?" "He thinks you should put cinnamon in chili." Daniel raised a hand. "It's a Midwestern thing." Logan looked at Rachel. "Tell him he's insane." Rachel laughed, the tension draining from her shoulders. "He is." But not about that. It was the first time they had joked together in front of her. She didn't say anything more, just set down her folders and quietly joined them in the kitchen. The next morning, Logan came downstairs and found Daniel in the garage, fixing the garden hose connection. He hovered near the door. "I was thinking of applying for that summer art camp, the one at the college downtown." Daniel turned slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. "That's a great idea. They only take 10 students, it's selective. I think you've got a good shot." Logan nodded once. "Would you write a recommendation?" Daniel blinked. "Me? I mean, you know my work. You've seen more than most people." Daniel didn't say yes right away. He let the silence fill with weight, then answered simply, "Of course." Logan turned and walked away without another word, but Daniel saw the way his fingers curled slightly around the strap of his backpack, as if holding something tightly. The gesture said what the boy could not. The application was submitted 2 days later. Rachel proofread the essay. Daniel wrote the letter. Logan said nothing about either. But the night before the submission deadline, he left his sketchbook open on the coffee table, a silent invitation. Daniel flipped through it, careful not to leave smudges, each page revealing more than Logan would ever say out loud. Portraits of the house, the city skyline, the dog from next door. Rachel, drawn as if lit from within, and once more Daniel, this time sitting in the backyard reading under a tree. He didn't show Rachel, he didn't have to. That week Logan came down for dinner, took his usual seat, and halfway through the meal asked, "You still like jazz?" Daniel nodded, a little surprised. "Yeah. There's a concert at the park next Friday." Rachel smiled. "You want to go?" Logan shrugged. "Just thought I'd mention it." Daniel met his eyes. "I'd like that." It wasn't an invitation, not a request, just a fact laid down between them, waiting to be picked up. The next Friday they went. Logan wore headphones on the drive, but he sat beside Daniel on the blanket, arms crossed, head tilted slightly to the music. They didn't talk much. But at one point Logan leaned back on his elbows and whispered, The trumpet reminds me of that movie. Daniel nodded. I hear it too. No more words were needed. The unspoken agreements between them held, delicate, evolving, deeply real. July arrived with the fullness of summer, and with it came a stretch of ordinary days that felt, to Daniel, like a kind of quiet victory. There were no sudden breakthroughs or declarations of change, just the steady, dependable rhythm of a family, learning how to move forward together. The air conditioner hummed softly through the house. Logan's sketchbook was left on the living room table without hesitation, and Rachel's laughter echoed more often. Even the silence between them had shifted. It no longer guarded itself, but seemed to welcome presence without needing to fill the space. Then, one Thursday morning, a letter arrived. It was addressed to Logan in a stiff white envelope, the college's crest embossed in the corner. Rachel found it in the mailbox and brought it into the kitchen, where Logan was still working through a bowl of cereal, his sketchpad open beside him. She placed it gently on the table and stepped back without saying anything. Logan looked at it without touching it. His spoon froze halfway to his mouth. Daniel, who was pouring coffee nearby, didn't speak either. The room held its breath. Rachel gave Logan a soft nod. Whenever you're ready. Logan finished chewing slowly, set the spoon down and picked up the envelope. He didn't tear it open. He slid his finger under the flap with careful precision and removed the single sheet inside. His eyes moved across the page quickly at first, then slowed, his breath catching just slightly. Rachel leaned forward. Well? I got in, Logan said. His voice was quiet, still, but his hands trembled as he folded the letter again. Daniel smiled, holding back his instinct to say anything that might break the moment. Rachel stepped forward and kissed the top of Logan's head. I knew you would, she whispered. Logan nodded, but didn't smile. Not yet. There's a list of supplies I need, and it starts in 3 weeks. Daniel spoke at last. Whatever you need, we'll figure it out. Logan met his eyes briefly. Thanks. He stood, took the letter with him, and disappeared up the stairs. Rachel exhaled, relief and joy mingling in her expression. He got in. Daniel nodded. He earned it. But joy rarely travels alone. With the letter came a shift, an invisible pressure that neither Daniel nor Rachel could name, but both felt. Logan became quieter over the following days, not withdrawn, not hostile, just inward, focused, like someone preparing for something they couldn't fully define. One afternoon, Daniel found him in the garage again, working on a new frame. The wood was rougher, the edges uneven, the nails scattered without pattern. You building another one? Daniel asked. For the acceptance letter, Logan replied. I want it on my wall. Daniel smiled. Good idea. Logan hesitated, then asked, do you think I'll fit in there with real artists? Daniel didn't answer right away. He stepped forward, picked up a level from the workbench, and began helping straighten the frame. I think they're going to be lucky to have you. Logan nodded once. Okay, that was all. That weekend, they went shopping for supplies. Rachel led them through the store, a checklist in hand, while Daniel and Logan pushed the cart. Pencils, brushes, charcoal, pads, inks, portfolio cases. Daniel noticed how Logan hesitated over each item, touching them with reverence as if unsure he deserved them. Rachel noticed too. You're allowed to like this, she said gently. You don't have to earn every ounce of permission. Logan didn't reply. But when they got home, he laid everything out on the dining table and looked at it for a long time before packing it all away. The next day, Daniel returned home from work to find Logan sitting on the porch, the framed acceptance letter resting against the wall beside him. You ever leave home when you were my age? Logan asked without looking up. No, Daniel replied. I didn't have anywhere to go. Do you think it's okay that I'm excited? Daniel sat beside him. Yes. I feel like I shouldn't be, like I'm leaving something behind. You're not leaving, you're growing. That's not the same thing. Logan nodded slowly, then said, I had a dream about him last night. Daniel didn't ask who. He didn't need to. We were sitting at the lake. He was telling me to pack light. He said, the less you carry, the easier it is to find space for something new. Daniel let the silence stretch. I woke up and felt like I could finally breathe, Logan added. Daniel didn't reply. He just sat with him, watching the sun lower across the rooftops. That night, Rachel suggested they celebrate. She baked Logan's favorite cake, not lemon but vanilla with chocolate drizzle. They ate together, laughed softly, and even played a board game Rachel found in the back of the closet. Logan won, of course, and made no effort to hide his quiet pride. Afterward, as they cleaned up, Daniel caught a glimpse of the framed letter now hanging in the hallway. Logan had added something below it, a small note printed neatly on cardstock. It read, "This is not the end of something. It's the start of something else." Daniel stood there a moment longer than necessary. Later, he passed Logan's room and noticed the door slightly ajar. The boy was packing again, sorting supplies into a canvas bag. He looked up. "Do you want to drive me on the first day?" Daniel blinked. "To the college?" "Yeah." Daniel nodded slowly. "I'd like that." Logan returned to packing without another word. That night, Rachel found Daniel in the living room, sitting with his hands clasped together. "He asked me to drive him," Daniel said. Rachel smiled. "Of course he did. He trusts you." Daniel looked at her, eyes steady. "Do you think I'll ever be a father to him?" Rachel reached for his hand. "You already are." He didn't respond. But the truth of it sat between them, quiet and undeniable. The letter had changed everything. Not because it gave Logan a future, but because it gave shape to something they had all been building, piece by piece, in silence and in patience. And now, for the first time, it was real. The day before the summer program began, the house moved with a different kind of energy. Measured, deliberate, and filled with silences that felt heavier than usual. Rachel was already in the kitchen when Daniel came down, sipping coffee slowly, her eyes tracking every sound from upstairs as Logan finished his final round of packing. The night before, they had eaten dinner together quietly, all three aware that time was slipping quickly through the cracks. Logan had not said much, but his focus was sharp. He folded his clothes carefully, placed his sketchbook in a padded case, arranged his pencils with the precision of someone trying to control the things he still could. Daniel entered the kitchen and poured himself a cup of coffee. Rachel looked at him, then toward the stairs. "He didn't sleep much," she said. "I heard him walking around after midnight." Daniel nodded, but said nothing. They had planned the drive to the college for 10 o'clock. The campus was only a little over an hour away, but the journey already carried the weight of something more than a simple ride. It was a crossing, a shift in rhythm they had come to rely on. At 8:30, Logan came down with his bag slung over his shoulder and his sketch tube in one hand. He wore a plain t-shirt, jeans, and his headphones hung around his neck. There was no announcement, no dramatic gesture. He simply appeared in the doorway. "Cars packed?" he asked. Rachel stood and walked to him. She reached up and adjusted his collar slightly, the way she used to when he was little. "It's ready." "We are." Logan looked toward Daniel. "You still want to drive?" Daniel held his gaze. "Absolutely." Rachel embraced Logan tightly, her hands pressing into his back, but she didn't say too much, just held him, then kissed his cheek and stepped back. "You'll be great," she whispered. "You don't need to prove anything. Just be there. Take it in." Logan nodded, eyes dry but blinking more than usual. Daniel took the keys and led the way outside. The morning was warm, the sun not yet harsh, the air filled with the sounds of cicadas and the rustle of early wind through the trees. They drove in silence at first, Logan staring out the window, music faintly playing from his headphones. Daniel kept his hands steady on the wheel, the road stretching long and familiar. Halfway through the drive, Logan spoke. "I don't know what it's going to be like." Daniel didn't look at him. "Neither do I, but I think that's okay." Logan hesitated. "What if I'm not good enough?" "You're already good enough," Daniel said. "You just have to show up. That's the hard part." Logan didn't respond right away. Then softly, "I'm scared." Daniel let the moment sit, then said, "So was I." Logan turned to him. "When?" "When I moved in. When I said yes to your mom. When I first realized how much I cared about you, and I didn't know if you'd ever care back." Logan looked down at his hands, gripping his sketch tube. "You didn't act scared. I was. Every day. Still am sometimes." The silence that followed was thick, but no longer cold. It was the silence of two people who had stopped pretending they weren't connected. As they neared the college, traffic thickened. Students and parents moved like slow rivers across the campus lawns. Tents had been set up for check-in, and music played from speakers near the entrance to the art building. Logan straightened in his seat, his eyes narrowing. Daniel parked and turned off the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Logan opened the door. They walked side by side to the registration area. Daniel stood nearby while Logan signed forms and received his orientation folder. When it was done, a volunteer pointed them toward the dormitory. Inside the room, Logan placed his bag on the narrow bed and stood staring at the plain walls and the large window that faced a courtyard below. Other students arrived with parents in tow, their voices bouncing in the hallway. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed. "You need help unpacking?" Logan shook his head. "I got it." Daniel stood again, unsure what to say next. Logan turned to him. "You were right," he said. "It wasn't about filling a hole. It was about building something new." Daniel blinked, caught off guard. "You said that once, or something like it." "I remember," Daniel said quietly. "I used to think you were trying to take his place," Logan continued. "I hated that idea, but now I know. You didn't want that. You just wanted in." Daniel nodded slowly. "Still do." Logan stepped forward, hesitant, then wrapped his arms around Daniel in a brief, stiff hug. It was awkward, it was sudden, and it was real. "Thank you," Logan whispered. Daniel held his breath for a moment before placing a hand on Logan's back. "I'm proud of you." They stepped apart. Logan looked toward the door. "You should probably go before it gets crowded." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, I'll give your mum the update." He reached for the doorknob, paused and turned back. "I'll be around if you need anything." Logan nodded. "I know." Daniel stepped out into the hallway, the door closing behind him with a soft click. The sounds of students, parents, laughter and movement filled the space around him, but he stood still for a long moment. It was the first goodbye. Not just a departure, not just a drop-off, but a shift. Daniel walked back to the car, the sun now high in the sky, the breeze warmer carrying the sound of new beginnings. He started the engine, looked once more toward the building where Logan now stood at the edge of something unknown, and drove home in silence. Rachel was waiting on the porch when he arrived. She stood as he parked, her eyes searching his face. "He's in," Daniel said. "He's good." Rachel walked down the steps and into his arms. And in the quiet of that afternoon, surrounded by sunlight and the scent of summer grass, Daniel understood that the first goodbye wasn't about letting go. It was about standing back and letting someone finally step forward. The house felt too quiet in the days after Logan left. It was not the kind of silence that came from peace, but the kind that settles when something once present has shifted just out of reach. Rachel moved through the rooms with the look of someone trying not to touch anything, as if even small adjustments might disturb a fragile balance. Daniel noticed how she lingered at the kitchen window, often pausing mid-task to glance out, as if half expecting to see Logan coming down the sidewalk, sketch tube over his shoulder, face unreadable as always. Daniel did not speak much about the absence. He knew the weight of it had a way of landing differently for each person. For Rachel, it was maternal space. Empty places at the table, unchecked homework folders now left untouched. For Daniel, it was the disappearance of the small rituals they had built without realizing it. The quiet hey from the staircase, the soft shuffle of pencils late at night, the faint sound of footsteps crossing the hall when the house had already gone to bed. They received the first text 2 days after drop-off. It was short. A picture of Logan's dorm desk already cluttered with sketches and notes, followed by the words, "Settling in." Rachel responded quickly. "Proud of you. Keep us updated. Love you." There was no reply for a day. Then another message came. "Orientation's overwhelming. Art classes look legit, though." Daniel read the text and smiled. That's him. Rachel tried not to check her phone constantly, but Daniel caught her doing it more than once. The house, once adjusted to Logan's silences, now had to adjust to his absence, and it proved harder than expected. By the end of the first week, they received a call. Rachel answered on speaker, her voice hopeful. "Hey, sweetheart." "Hey," Logan said, his tone flat but not cold. "Just wanted to check in." Daniel listened from across the table. "How's the dorm?" Rachel asked. "Small. Roommates all right, we don't talk much. Eating okay? Food's gross but manageable." Daniel stepped closer to the phone. "Any good assignments yet?" There was a pause. "We're starting a project tomorrow. Self-portrait using mixed media. They said it should show who we are beyond the surface. Rachel and Daniel exchanged a look. That sounded like a challenge Logan might take to heart. Sounds like something you'll crush, Daniel said. Maybe, Logan replied. Then after a beat, I've been sketching a lot. I brought the lake drawing with me. Rachel's voice softened. That's good. I was hoping you would. The call ended without ceremony. A brief, talk later, and the line went silent. But even that short exchange was enough to stretch a thin thread between them, one that would need constant tending. As the days passed, the absence grew heavier, not in grief, but in distance. Logan was not gone forever, but the daily proximity they had grown accustomed to was no longer there. Daniel found himself pacing at night, checking his email more often than usual, half expecting a message that never came. Then, late one evening, Daniel received an email with no subject line. It was from Logan. Attached was a scanned image of a new piece, a collage of photos, paper clippings, and charcoal sketches blended into a portrait that did not resemble Logan's face, but carried his eyes. At the center was a figure that looked very much like Daniel, sitting on a porch, reading, surrounded by faint images of trees, the lake, and a small sketchbook floating in the corner. The message beneath was one line. They said to include someone who shaped me. Daniel stared at the screen for a long time. He didn't forward the message. He didn't mention it to Rachel right away. He simply saved the image, printed a copy, and placed it in the same folder where he had kept Logan's earlier drawing. The weight of distance, he realized, was not in the miles. It was in the missing rhythms, the things that filled the in-between moments. But the connection remained, quiet, evolving, sometimes hidden beneath silence, but intact. Rachel noticed the change in Daniel's mood. One night while they sat on the couch with the television playing in the background, she said, "You miss him?" Daniel nodded. "I got used to the version of us with him in the room." Rachel leaned her head on his shoulder. "Me too. We knew this would happen," he said. "Knowing doesn't make it easier." She paused, then added, "But it's good, right? That he's there, that he wants to be there." "It's better than good," Daniel said. "It's just quiet." Later that week, they received a postcard in the mail. No return address, just Logan's handwriting in the corner. "Still hate cafeteria food. Got an A on the first project. Might need more charcoal sticks. Hope you're not rearranging the house without me." Rachel laughed when she read it. Daniel placed the postcard on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a seashell, a souvenir Logan had found during a forgotten beach trip. In the absence, they began creating new rituals. Daniel started a small herb garden in the kitchen. Rachel took out her old piano music and practiced in the evenings. On Sundays, they set a place at the table for Logan anyway, just for the gesture, not out of denial, but out of quiet love. The first visit home would not come for several more weeks, but the space he had once occupied remained his. Not as a placeholder, but as proof that distance could stretch what was built, but not undo it. One evening, as Daniel prepared dinner, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a short video. Logan standing in front of his latest piece in the studio, pointing the camera back toward himself. He didn't speak, just raised an eyebrow as if to ask, "Well?" Daniel recorded a reply. No words, just a slow nod and a thumbs up. He sent it, then looked at Rachel. "He's okay," he said, and she smiled. "So are we." The phone call came on a Wednesday evening just after sunset. Daniel had just finished cleaning the kitchen, the sound of running water still fading as Rachel stepped onto the porch with her phone pressed to her ear. He noticed her body stiffen before she spoke, her voice suddenly sharper, quieter. "Yes, this is Rachel." She listened for several seconds without interruption, her free hand resting against the porch railing, fingers curling inward. Daniel approached slowly, wiping his hands on a towel, but Rachel didn't look at him. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you," she said, then paused again. No, it's not a good time. I don't know if it ever will be." She ended the call without another word and stood still, eyes fixed on some invisible point beyond the yard. Daniel stepped closer. "Everything all right?" She turned to him, and for a moment, something passed through her expression. Disbelief, old frustration, a trace of fear. That was Jared's brother. Daniel blinked. "I didn't know you still had contact." "I didn't." He moved away right after the funeral. We lost touch. I think he blamed me more than he let on." She paused. "He's back, in town, and he wants to see Logan." Daniel didn't reply immediately. He followed her back inside, both of them quiet as they settled into the living room. Rachel sat down, elbows on her knees, head in her hands. "He says he just wants to talk, that he's realized he made mistakes, that he feels he should have been there for Logan." Daniel sat beside her, close but not touching. "What do you think?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to shut it all down, but another part wonders if Logan should decide for himself." They let the conversation sit overnight. The next morning, Rachel texted Logan, choosing her words with care. "Jared's brother contacted us, says he's in town, asked to see you. No pressure, just wanted you to know." Logan replied later that afternoon. "Weird. I don't even remember him that much. Can I think about it?" Rachel showed the message to Daniel, who nodded. "It's not something you rush." A few days passed before Logan texted again. "Maybe if it's here, at home, just for a short visit." The idea of that meeting stirred something deeply unsettled in both Daniel and Rachel. They had built so much over the last year, carefully threading trust and memory into something fragile but real. The thought of someone from the past arriving, uninvited, unexpected, to stake a claim or unearth old grief, it felt dangerous. Still, they agreed. Rachel called Jared's brother, Michael, and gave him a date and time. No promises, just a window. On the day of the visit, Daniel trimmed the backyard while Rachel paced the living room. She had cleaned too thoroughly, wiped counters that didn't need it, adjusted photo frames that hadn't moved in months. When Logan arrived, he looked different, not older but more self-contained, like the world outside had shifted his posture. "You sure you're okay with this?" Rachel asked. Logan nodded. "I don't remember him much, but if he's family, I guess I should hear him out." Daniel kept a distance, letting Rachel and Logan prepare themselves. When the doorbell rang, they all froze for a second. Rachel opened it slowly. Michael stood on the porch, older than Daniel expected, dressed plainly in a buttoned shirt and dark jeans. His face carried the wear of someone who'd spent too long thinking about conversations he never had. "Hi," he said simply. Rachel stepped aside. "Come in." Logan stood near the staircase, arms crossed, expression guarded, but not hostile. Michael saw him and froze for a second before stepping forward. "You've grown," he said. Logan didn't respond. They all sat in the living room. Daniel remained quiet, watching, letting the space fill naturally. "I don't expect forgiveness," Michael said. "I just wanted to look you in the eye and say I'm sorry. I wasn't there. I should have been." Logan kept his gaze fixed. "Why weren't you?" Michael swallowed hard. "Grief makes people selfish sometimes. I couldn't handle it. So I ran. I told myself it was easier for you if I stayed away, but it wasn't. I know that now." Rachel watched, expression unreadable. Daniel glanced at Logan, whose posture hadn't changed. "You still talk to anyone from that side of the family?" Logan asked. "No," Michael admitted. "They all kind of scattered. I guess I did too." There was a pause, not quite comfortable, but not unbearable either. "Why now?" Logan asked. "Because I couldn't live with silence anymore," Michael said. "And because you deserve the truth, even if it's late." They sat for almost an hour. Michael spoke in short, halting sentences, recounting pieces of Jared's childhood, memories from before Logan was born, stories that Rachel half smiled at and half winced through. Logan listened but didn't offer much. When the time came for Michael to leave, he stood slowly and looked toward Rachel. "Thank you for letting me come." Rachel nodded, still seated. Michael turned to Logan. "If you ever want to talk again, I'll leave my number. No pressure, no expectations." Logan didn't take the card right away, but just before Michael reached the door, he stepped forward and took it. After the door closed, the house exhaled. Rachel sat back on the couch, exhausted. Daniel sat beside her. Logan stood near the window for a long moment before finally turning around. "He wasn't who I thought he'd be." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Good or bad? Just different." Logan paused. "I don't know if I want to talk to him again, but I'm glad I did." Rachel reached for his hand. He let her take it. That night, after Logan had gone to bed, Daniel and Rachel sat outside on the porch, the sky above them wide and still. "You think this will stir things up?" Rachel asked. Daniel looked toward the yard. Everything's always stirred. What matters is that we keep showing up. She leaned her head on his shoulder. We always do. The past had knocked. They had opened the door, not to let it back in, but to face it, acknowledge it, and close it gently behind them. And somehow the house felt lighter. The weeks that followed Michael's visit settled into a strange but welcome calm. Logan returned to the summer program after his brief weekend at home, and although he didn't mention the meeting again, something about him seemed subtly altered. He no longer responded with guarded silences. Instead, he replied with brevity and intention, like someone who had untangled a knot he hadn't even known was there. Daniel and Rachel returned to their routine, though the absence of Logan had grown into something deeper. Not painful, but present, like a quiet part of the house that always stayed dark after sundown. Daniel still found himself glancing at the door around the time Logan used to come home from school. Rachel, without thinking, continued to prepare an extra plate at dinner, even when she knew they would be only two. But change, once it begins, doesn't slow. One Wednesday morning, Logan sent a voice message instead of a text. "You guys free this weekend? They're letting us go home for 3 days before the final project showcase. Thought I'd stop by. Not bringing laundry. Promise." Rachel laughed aloud when she played it, and Daniel, overhearing from the hallway, smiled quietly to himself. They spent the next 2 days preparing, not cleaning, not decorating, just making space. Daniel repaired the leg of Logan's desk chair, which had been wobbling. Rachel restocked the pantry with Logan's favorite cereal and a new pack of charcoal pencils. Neither of them spoke about what they were doing. The gestures were simple, unspoken, and unmistakable. Logan arrived late Friday afternoon. He stepped out of the rideshare car with his canvas bag and a rolled tube of recent work. His hair was a little longer, his shoes worn, but his eyes were steady and his smile, brief as it was, reached the corners of his face. Rachel hugged him tightly. "You smell like paint and cafeteria food." Logan chuckled. "Pretty much all I've eaten for a month." Daniel stepped forward. "Good to see you." "You too," Logan said, his tone warm and even. He followed them inside, eyes scanning the familiar walls, the framed lake drawing, the herb garden Daniel had kept thriving. "You kept everything the same," he said, almost to himself. Daniel answered without hesitation, "You're still part of it." The weekend passed in a rhythm none of them had anticipated. Logan spent the first night sketching in the living room while Rachel graded papers nearby and Daniel read beside the open window. They didn't try to reclaim old routines. Instead, they made room for the version of Logan who had left and returned with new edges. On Saturday, Logan asked if they could drive to the lake. "The one from the drawing," he said. "I want to see it again." They went in the early afternoon. The sky was clear, the trees in full green, the air heavy with the smell of earth and water. Logan stood at the edge of the hill for a long time, his sketchbook open but unused. His gaze stretched across the surface of the lake like someone reading a familiar story in a new language. "Everything looks smaller," he said. Rachel stood beside him. "You grew." They sat on the grass, the three of them sharing silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or distant hum of a boat motor. Daniel watched as Logan finally opened his sketchbook and began to draw. Not the lake, not the trees, but Rachel and Daniel, sitting side by side on the ground, their backs to him. He said nothing while he worked. That evening, Logan placed the finished drawing on the kitchen table. It was raw and spare, just 2 figures and the outline of a tree, but the emotion in the lines was unmistakable. "I'm going to use this for my final showcase," he said. Rachel looked at it, then at Logan. "It's beautiful. I wanted to show where I'm from," he said simply. Later that night, Logan found Daniel in the garage putting away tools. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Michael texted me," he said. Daniel didn't look up. "How's he doing?" "He wants to meet again." "Just the 2 of us." Daniel placed the hammer on the shelf. "Do you want that?" "I think I do," Logan replied. "I don't know what will come of it, but it doesn't scare me anymore." Daniel nodded. "That matters." They stood in silence for a moment before Logan added, "He asked about you." Daniel blinked. "Me?" "Said he was surprised by how I talked about you. Said you sounded like someone who'd been around forever." Daniel smiled faintly. "I haven't." "Feels like you have," Logan said, voice low. It wasn't an affirmation, it wasn't a declaration, but it was something real. On Sunday morning, before Logan left again, they ate pancakes around the table like old times. Daniel poured syrup slowly, while Rachel teased Logan about his laundry avoidance. The radio played softly in the background. As Logan stood to leave, he looked at both of them, expression unreadable. "I think I'm going to come back more often," he said. "Not just when they let us, when I can." Rachel nodded, swallowing her emotion. "You'll always have a place here," Daniel said. Logan gave a quiet nod, then reached into his bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "It's not finished yet, but I wanted you to have this." He handed it to Daniel. It was another sketch, unfinished, more impressionistic than the others. 3 chairs on a porch, a table with coffee mugs, a breeze moving through the branches in the background. Daniel traced the lines with his eyes. "We'll save the real version for when you're back." Logan smiled. "Yeah, that's the plan." When the door closed behind him, the house did not feel emptier. It felt filled, full of moments, of movement, of a return that wasn't just physical but emotional. Logan hadn't come home for comfort. He had come home to show who he had become. The final showcase of the summer program arrived beneath a late August sky, the kind that carried the first breath of autumn within its warmth. Daniel and Rachel drove to the college campus early that Saturday morning, neither speaking much during the ride. Anticipation hung between them, quiet but full. Logan had sent few details about the exhibit beyond a brief message. "You'll know which one's mine." They arrived at the campus gallery shortly after the doors opened. A modest crowd had already gathered, students, families, professors, strangers drawn in by curiosity. The building, filled with natural light, had been transformed into a maze of color and contrast. Paintings, sculptures, mixed media, and charcoal sketches lined the walls and corners. Daniel and Rachel moved slowly, taking in the artwork, pausing when something caught their eye, but always scanning for what Logan had left unsaid. It took them nearly 15 minutes to find it. At the far end of the hall, on a clean white wall without any surrounding pieces, hung a large, striking composition titled "The Place We Built." It was unmistakably Logan's. Rendered in charcoal, paper collage, and faint ink washes, the piece was quiet yet commanding. It featured 3 figures, one seated, one standing, one leaning against a porch railing. The porch itself was rendered in detail, a coffee mug half full, an open sketchbook on the table, a sliver of the lake in the background. But it wasn't the accuracy that gripped the viewer. It was the feeling, the stillness, the weight of shared history, the presence of quiet love. Below the piece, a short artist's statement was pinned. "This is not a tribute to what I lost. It is a reflection of what I chose to keep. We don't replace the ones who shaped us, we carry them, and sometimes we make space beside them for someone new. This is where I come from. This is where I return to. This is what we built together." Rachel stood with her hand over her mouth, tears brimming. Daniel remained silent, but his chest felt full in a way he hadn't expected. Not pride, not satisfaction, something quieter, deeper, a recognition. They stood there for a long time. Students and visitors passed, pausing at the piece, nodding, reading the statement, moving on. But Daniel and Rachel remained. When Logan finally emerged from a side hallway with a group of classmates, he spotted them across the room and walked over, his posture relaxed but alert. Rachel embraced him immediately. "You made me cry," she whispered. Logan half smiled. "That's how I know I got it right." Daniel waited and Logan stepped toward him. They didn't hug. They didn't need to. "You found it," Logan said. Daniel nodded. "It found us." The 3 of them left the exhibit together, walking across the campus lawn where tents had been set up for snacks and music. Logan introduced them to his instructors, who spoke highly of his precision, his growth, his perspective. He responded with quiet gratitude, neither bragging nor deflecting, just present. They sat under a tree afterward, watching students mill around. Logan leaned back against the trunk, arms folded behind his head. "I've been thinking," he said, "about the next steps." Rachel looked over. "What kind of steps?" "More classes," Logan said. "Maybe full enrollment next year. This place feels right." Daniel nodded. "You've made something here. But I want to keep coming back," Logan added. "Not just for visits, I want both. Roots and wings, I guess." Rachel smiled. You don't have to choose. Daniel reached for a small branch on the ground and traced lines into the dirt. You've already built your bridge. Just keep walking it. Logan looked at him thoughtful. You're still part of it. Daniel met his gaze. So are you. They spent the rest of the afternoon meandering through campus, picking up lunch from a food truck, sharing bites and stories. Logan opened up more than usual about his classmates, his process, the nights he stayed up sketching, the doubts that still crept in even when everything seemed to be working. Rachel listened intently. Daniel offered the occasional quiet encouragement. That evening, as they prepared to leave, Logan walked with them to the car. He placed his sketchbook in the back seat, then paused, hands in his pockets. I think I'm going to stay in town this fall, he said. Take more classes here, maybe even help out in the art department. Rachel touched his arm. Whatever you choose, we're here. He nodded. I know. He turned to Daniel, eyes steady. You didn't just step in. You stayed. That's what mattered. Daniel didn't reply with words. He simply held out a hand. Logan shook it, firmly, fully, and then stepped forward into a brief, solid hug. Rachel blinked back tears. Daniel kept his composure, but his hands trembled as he started the engine. They watched Logan walk back toward the campus buildings, the late light casting long shadows across the lawn. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. In the months that followed, Logan kept his promise. He returned often, not just as a visitor, but as a thread in the daily fabric of the household. He joined for dinners, helped Rachel plant new herbs in the garden, handed Daniel a new sketch every so often without explanation. They never labeled what they had built. It didn't need a name. It was the unforgettable ending of something that began not with grand declarations or promises, but with the quiet choice to stay, to show up, to try. And in that choice every day, they had made something more than recovery. They had made a life,